stand by for manual transmission. In 3, 2, 1.
If you don't eat your meat, you can't have any pudding.
Hey everyone, Manus Dextra here with a video I really didn't want to make. So I'm aware this is pretty much just me shouting at clouds, but I really need to get this off my chest. So I think Elite is in a very bad place right now, and it's heading in the wrong direction. And this isn't just me projecting either. If you visit the official forums, you'll see what I mean. The one consistently active topic is about how everyone should just stop complaining and lower their expectations for the game. It's mostly just the same few posters arguing the same tired points, while other topics are mostly ignored, taking 2 or 3 days to slide off the front page. In 2 recent community posts, linked below, Obsidian Ant asked his community about their anticipation for and or interest in the recent update. Now, sure, this isn't a scientific poll, but it is a very large sample, over 5,000 people, from a long-established node in the Elite Dangerous community. And more than 2/3 of them don't seem to care at all or actively dislike the update. Even FDev has admitted in their annual report that Odyssey had a challenging launch and that player engagement since then has been disappointing. If you look at the store page on Steam, you'll see that even the base game has slipped back into mixed territory for player reviews. And a look at Steam charts for the game over the last year shows that the game has a solid floor of about 6,000 players per month. But if you zoom out to all time, you'll see that's about what they started with way back in 2014. So I suspect these are hardcore MMO players who enjoy trying to manipulate the background simulation, along with people who play mostly alone or in private groups, and I wonder how much ongoing revenue any of these groups actually generate. Like a lot of people, I play Elite in spite of the fact that it's an MMO. And to be sure, I like the multiplayer open universe, even though I don't play in any actual groups. I always play in open, and I'm always ready for a bit of interaction, whether it's winging up for some co-op or doing a bit of PvP. And I definitely don't play it for the grindy progression system, and I'm at the point where I am just done with that part of it. And let me be clear, I don't want an easy button or free access to in-game content from the beginning, and I understand the necessity of pacing for players and developers alike. As Andrew Gavin, co-founder of Naughty Dog, explains, cost is undoubtedly the biggest factor in the grind. MMO players play long, and some exceedingly long. At first, the only way to put any kind of brakes on these hardcore players was to make the grind really, really long or hard. Essentially, it takes far, far less time to play content than to create it. A dungeon might take an hour or 2 to play, but weeks of work by an entire team to create. There's no way a team could realistically create and test all that new content in real time, no matter how big. So yeah, I get the necessity of pacing, but that doesn't mean these time-sinking activities need to be boring, repetitious, or generally unfun. They just need to take up time. And I'm really not sure how Elite's progression system got to be the way it is with all the material gathering, but I suspect it was a poor attempt to make planetary surfaces and SRVs relevant back when Horizons was a separate purchase from the base game. Making players who want to do combat wander around Guardian sites or nearly barren planets, scooping materials for hours on end to obtain materials so that they can build better ships to do combat is just bad. I put up with the raw material gathering and the Guardian grind because Elite has some of the best space combat I've ever played. But every time I get pulled out of what I consider to be the fun parts of the game to do some grindy unlock, I resent it a little bit more. So the real turning point for me happened about 3 months ago at the time of recording. I was going to build a railgun trainer out of a newly acquired Imperial Courier. Unfortunately, I ran short on raw materials for the build. Now, I was going to make the trip out to the Crystal Shart Forest again and do the soul-killingly boring material gathering loop, but lucky for me, MechWarrior 5 dropped another DLC around that time, and I decided to play that instead. Now, like I said before, I play Elite in spite of the fact that it's an MMO, not because of it. So MechWarrior 5 actually scratches a lot of the same itches for me, namely sci-fi themed combat and vehicle modification customization.
This is a bloodletting operation, Commander. Our mission is to cripple a series of comm towers located at the marked locations and bugger off before enemy forces know what's hit them. We'll be back to pick you up when the job is done. Good hunting.
There's no PvP there, but there is a serviceable co-op system, and there's lots of content thanks to a decent procedurally generated mission system. And much like the ships in Elite, the mech chassis in MechWarrior 5 all feel different, each with its own personality, and they can all be outfitted in many different ways to suit many different playstyles. But unlike Elite, that game is built around a progression system that never feels like a chore to do, but most definitely still requires time and effort to negotiate. Now, to be fair, MechWarrior 5 is a much more limited game in terms of activities offered. I mean, it's all just big, stompy robot combat, and the progression system is simple. If you want better stuff, learn to punch up and take it from your defeated enemies. This is the way most games, in my experience, handle progression. Even in most other MMOs, if you're playing a certain type of character, like a spellcaster in World of Warcraft, the devs don't make you go sword fighting for 12 hours to improve your spellcasting abilities. But in Elite, if I want the best shields for combat, I'll need to unlock the proper engineer by doing trades in 50 commodities markets. In Elite, if I want the best thrusters for combat, I'll need to make a 10,000 light-year exploration trip first. In Elite, if I want the best hull and armor for combat, I'll need to build a mining ship and mine 500 tons of ore first. Then, on top of that, I'll still need to spend dozens of hours gathering materials via means that don't involve combat at all. Again, I appreciate the need for pacing, but forcing players out of their preferred game loops for hours on end is beyond bad game design. It's like the "how can you have any pudding if you don't eat your meat" school of game design, and it's just crazy as hell. So, however the game got to this point, with slumping numbers and player apathy as it is, I think FDev is not likely to put many more resources into its development. People calling for things like ship interiors and EVA in space are kidding themselves. That's what Odyssey should have focused on but didn't. It's a missed opportunity and way too much work to add now. However, I have a modest proposal that wouldn't be a lot of work, but it would completely solve my problem with the base game at least. And as an added bonus, if you like the current progression system as it is, you won't be affected at all. So if you want, you can still savor that grind. But yeah, no engineering overhauls or anything like that, because that is definitely too much work at this point, and it's clear FDev isn't interested in that level of investment in the game anymore. But what they could do pretty easily is simply add a mission board system to each engineer's base. This would give players an alternative mission-based way to unlock engineers. Instead of mining 500 tons of ore to unlock Celine Jean, let me go assassinate everyone who ever criticized her research instead.
Enemy wiped out. Standing by.
Also, they could easily make all engineering and tech broker materials obtainable as mission rewards, just like data and manufactured materials are now. And if they did this, they would actually have a far more effective way to pace players through the game. I would happily run assassination missions for half a day to earn enough raw materials to finish my railgun courier, but at this point I would rather chew my own nutsack off than waste 5 more minutes of my precious gaming time scooping up stuff in an SRV. And I don't think I'm the only one who feels this way. I know the grind problem is often stated as, this is taking too long on the official forums, but doing anything you don't like for any amount of time is too long, especially when it's supposed to be a recreational activity. If you let people choose their own time sink via missions, you could actually pace them for much longer because they won't perceive it negatively as grind because they'll be having fun. And players who aren't frustrated by grind are more likely to buy cosmetics to support the game. At least that's how it works for me. So, I'm not quitting the game, but I'm not building more ships or unlocking anything via material grinds anymore either. As it is, I've got one more finished build video coming, and ironically, it is for a mostly ignored but extremely fun combat-centric game loop. But that's for another happier video. So until then,
You will now be released from manual control. Mr. Dextra thanks you for your cooperation. You will now be released from manual control. Mr. Dextra thanks you for your cooperation. You will now be released from manual control. Mr. Dextra thanks you for your cooperation.